begin by recognizing gathering. As well as Media Commission, the concept of a free press goes to, if it's important, a society that does not communicate or share ideas is a society that will be done. And the media is very epicenter of the communication and sharing of ideas. Hence, a free press, even the Constitution recognizes this. The developments that we've seen in the past 5 years in terms of media freedom, opening up of media space, also speak to those key concerns that we need a sustainable media that can drive us and serve a 2030 vision society. But my says access to information for a clean environment, utilizing the Freedom of Information Act for a sustainable environment. So the issues I'll speak to, partly will speak to what FOIA says, the Freedom of Information Act, and how then it can be harnessed to ensure that we can enjoy a clean, safe environment, a sustainable environment that our citizens can then benefit from. So, by the cabinet meeting Tuesday evening, there is a press conference where a post-cabinet briefing where the cabinet literally tells you what they've discussed, what they've resolved, and so on and so forth. So that's the law anticipates that more and more institutions will be moving more towards voluntary release of information rather than situations where we have to demand information. The act to the FOIA, there's a schedule at the end which has got a form which you use for applying. If you don't use that form, the institution can say no. One organization wrote to me last week or the other week saying we wrote to the hospital in Bulawayo and asked for information on the number of child deaths in the past 1 year, and the hospital refused. So we're now going to court. I said, no, there's no need to go to court. First and foremost, it used the form. No, we didn't. We thought the form was too technical. I said, no. I've seen villagers using that form. You can't tell me that a whole institution cannot fill that form. When fill that form, use the formal process when the deny information come to us. Because from what, on the surface, what you are looking for is really about service delivery, it's about accountability, it's about transparency. That information must be available. So I'm saying this to emphasize to journalists that this is an important window of opportunity for you to access information and strengthen your stories. We get a lot of stories that say unnamed sources. So ask yourself, is it really an unnamed source or is the journalist and his colleagues concocting information? But so we want evidence. We want evidence, and this is an opportunity to gather evidence in a formal, transparent manner. Evidence that can stand up to scrutiny anyway. So all public entities are mandated by law to appoint a public information officer. And we must make it clear that when I talk about public information officer, this is not just an ordinary information officer of the institution. The CEO of that organization or the head of secretariat of that organization is responsible for appointing a public information officer, so that when you are requesting information, you approach that public information officer. It is their duty to store information in a retrievable manner and also to release it when it is requested. So at ZMC, it is my responsibility to ensure that there is a public information office. When a public information officer has not been appointed and has not been informed, the assumption is that the CEO is a public information officer. Okay, so here we're not talking about the normal information officer in the institution. It's for purposes of this act. The CEO may decide that the ordinary information officer is the public information officer. That's okay, that's an internal issue, but the law requires that there should be that public information officer. I won't go into too much depth on FOIA. It requires a whole 3 days. But let me just say that there is certain information that you cannot request, especially issues where there are issues of security and national interest. You cannot write, for instance, to the commander of the defense forces and say, how many live rounds do you have? We want to know. It's obvious of a security nature. Right? I asked a question in some workshop and I said, so journalists, if you discovered that Zimbabwe has 10 working tanks and 1,000 rifles, would you publish that information in your newspaper? There was a huge debate on it. Some said yes, citizens have a right to access that kind of information. Some said no, but you are opening up Zimbabwe to attack. It means even a group of guys can come up and say we are going to attack Zimbabwe tomorrow, if that was the situation. So issues of a security nature cannot be requested, and if you request, we will tell you that no, you can't. Or where there is protection of national interest, that information cannot be requested. You cannot request cabinet minutes, for instance. I want to know, Your Excellency, what we're discussing yesterday. Can you see the minutes? You cannot do that. You will say no, the law does not allow. But
the women made noise and started to query and blackmailed us into saying, so this king had no queen. What kind of a king was this person? So we then acceded to that blackmail and started to say Bulawayo is the city of kings and queens. But that's a story for another day. You know Beijing, you can't win that war. So welcome to the city of kings and queens. Positioning the media to amplify the environment story for a sustainable future. So from the onset, you will realize that the title or the heading of the presentation is somewhat a challenge, to us media practitioners to say, in whatever we do, we should seek to prioritize the environmental story, and in whatever we do, we should seek to proffer solutions and try to pave the way, for a sustainable future. So it is befitting that we meet today to celebrate the World Press Freedom Day, belated as it may. But the topic of the day is very, very important, and it is timely because we are living in an era of climate change. We are living in an era whereby the effects of climate change are there for everyone to see. So as highlighted by UNESCO, the aim of this year's theme is to highlight the significant role that the media plays in the dissemination of information to ensure and secure a sustainable future. The media has a crucial role to play in bringing attention to the urgent need for action to address the environmental crisis. So the challenge that we are being given as the media is to bring attention to the urgent need, to address the environmental crisis. So climate change, deforestation, pollution, and loss of biodiversity are some of the threats facing our planet. It is through the coverage and investigation of these issues that the media can raise awareness and mitigate the challenges of climate change and environmental degradation for a sustainable future. The effects of climate change are becoming increasingly evident, with devastating droughts, floods, and food security becoming more frequent in many parts of the world, Africa and Zimbabwe included. We, as Zimbabweans, are in the midst of a drought that has been induced by El Nino, which means that the drought has been induced by climate change. So we now know that climate change is real, isn't it? Way back, some people might have thought that climate change is a myth. or climate change is a debate for Westerners or people from another planet. But we now know that it is real. We have seen devastating floods. We have seen extreme heat waves. We have seen extreme low temperatures. We have seen floods. So we now know that climate change is real. You know, talking about print, talking about television, we're talking about radio, we're talking about social media, and all the available means of communication. The media has to inform audiences on what to expect through environmental and weather, through our environmental and weather articles, and debunk some myths that some rural or religious people might have on the climate change discourse. There are a lot of myths. You know, when the discourse of climate change was being introduced to us, people didn't believe that there was something called climate change. Perhaps some people believed that the rains were not coming because there were a lot of elderly women in the area who were into some witchcraft practices. You know, some believed that the rains were not coming because there were a lot of bones in the bush, because some apostles were leaving some white clothes and red clothes, you know, in the bush, you know, during after their prayer. So there were a lot of myths that people believed in. But the underlying factor was that you know, climate change had actually arrived. You know. But there was that lack of information, there was that lack of understanding. So it is the role of the media to debunk some of these myths and give and equip our masses with the right and correct information. For instance, the weather patterns have changed, isn't it? So my grandmother in Philippines used to be informed that the weather patterns have changed. So if the weather patterns have changed, what is she supposed to do in as far as cropping or farming is concerned? That's the approach that we are doing. So you are now even, as journalists, you are now even taking charge and guiding, you know, that process of preparing for a farming season for the rural folk by giving them correct information that has been researched from the expert for the planet, driving positive change and contributing to making a difference in the face of environmental crisis. The media has to give voices to all communities, rural and urban. So climate change or the environmental discourse, it affects anyone, whether you are in town or even if you are in rural areas. It affects you, isn't it? You know, how many tons of maize did a particular village produce? And after El Nino, how many tons were produced, isn't it? So if you have that kind of a story, at least you are demonstrating the effects of environmental change. We are actually demonstrating the effects of climate change. We are saying that before El Nino, we had 50 tons. After El Nino, we have 5 tons, or we have got 0. And as a result, there is hunger and starvation in this village. So what does your story do? It then brings spotlight to those particular people, for policymakers, for government, for NGOs, to then say, oh, okay, so we have got a crisis there. Those people need what? They need assistance. So that's the role that we have to play in that. Drought. How many cake did Inspector Lapana have before the drought? After the drought, how many cake did he have? So you want to take the story from the top there, isn't it? And bring it to the ordinary level and bring it to the people's level, isn't it? To show that this thing is actually affecting me and you. It is affecting a villager, you know, in rural Kwanda. It's affecting a villager in rural Matopo and rural Cholocho. You know, because of the drought in Cholocho, a guy, an old man in his 80s, who had 60 head of keki, the following year is down to 10. That is because of the drought. So those are the kind of stories that actually help to actually amplify, you know, the story of climate change by looking at real issues that are actually affecting people. Even in towns and cities, isn't it? You want to say, before the floods, how did our roads look like? And after the floods, how did our roads look like? So it's a story that an ordinary person can relate to, isn't it? And you can further demonstrate that by using pictures, isn't it? The before and after, isn't it? The before and after, isn't it?